This is the latest edition of Front Up, and I'm Whitey Willauer, and I've got a great guest here today, Bruce Miller. Good to have you on board here.
Nice to be here, Whitey.
Now tell me, you just had a wonderful election result. How do you feel now that you're one of the selectmen?
I feel very energized, and it was really a terrific process. I went into it, somewhat fearfully, and it turned out to be a really positive thing. I reconnected with a lot of people who I've known a long time but had kind of lost track of. I met a lot of new people, and I learned a tremendous amount about the issues, which I think will give me a good head start.
Now, what do you think about standing outside all day long?
I think it's a tradition that we should set aside. I would much prefer to have had 3 or 4 Meet the Candidates, which I thought was a terrific forum, and several hours less of standing outside, both on election day and the 2 days I spent at the landfill.
That's sort of like election, it's getting the signs up and having people screaming and yelling.
I know I'm swimming against the tide. It's a tradition that I'm sure we'll never set aside. But even if we didn't set the traditions aside, I think it would really be beneficial to have at least one more Meet the Candidates.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really terrific.
That was very helpful.
And I think the drive-by shooting was terrifically helpful.
That was very good. I watched yours and the others, and it seemed I learned a lot from that.
Yeah, I think it was a great way to get to know the candidates. I watched and learned about the other candidates, about whom I knew very little. So it was great.
Now you've had one meeting of the Board of Selectmen under your belt. What's your initial take on that?
I'm still energized. You haven't beaten me down yet.
Oh well, just wait. No.
I thought it was terrific. I also I was encouraged by the fact that it seemed a little bit less structured and formal than I have observed it to be in the past. And there was some, I thought, very positive collegial interaction as opposed to the really strict Robert's Rules formality. And I know you have to be very careful because you don't want to cross the line. But I thought it was great.
Well, we don't work under Robert's Rules of Order, but we sort of adhere to them. But
And I know for the most part people wait to be recognized, but not always. And that's something I was a little nervous about because I tend to get impatient sometimes, and I was trying to behave myself. But I was encouraged to see that others, the dialogue was allowed to flow, which I think is really good. So if you were in a sidebar with Bobby DaCosta, you could exchange you could finish your thought, your line of thought, without having to continually be recognized by the chair.
Go through the chair,
Yeah, which I think is great. I mean, that's as you know, I was a finance committee member for a long time, and I really believe that we function well, largely because our meetings allowed for a lot of exchange of ideas, and I think you build a greater degree of respect that way. And you get to listen to people. So
that works quite well. Now, how about you? You had a few issues you brought up, your own issues.
Right. Well, I don't like to think of them as my issues. I like to think of them as community issues that I'm advancing. One of which, the focus Wednesday was parking and downtown congestion, and a couple of thoughts on how maybe we could experiment with some new ideas.
Well, I was quite interested in your approach there, and I was giving you the bureaucratic approach of saying you got to go through various things, and then I think somebody jumped in and said, well, just write the daggone letter.
I think I'm going to get myself in trouble at some point.
Oh,
but,
sure.
Yeah, but I think there's a happy medium between the way I operate, which is just like full speed ahead.
Yeah, fire ready.
Damn the torpedo. Yeah, exactly. And then the right way to do things. And I think perhaps we'll find a good balance. But I wanted to, particularly on that issue where if we're going to really do anything this summer, we have to get started. I just thought it was important to blast away. And
I thought you had some other issues that you were
I think there were multiple components to the parking issue.
Yeah.
One was trying to get the taxi drivers to perhaps consider some kind of a round trip special fare to maybe compete with the valet parking, because my recollection was when valet parking came out, they were kind of squawking about the fact that we were favoring that. And whether they'll do it or not, I don't know. I think it'd be kind of fun, just kind of like a round trip ticket to your restaurant. I think it might encourage a lot of people to not drive into town.
So you'd park someplace and then get a round trip?
They'd come to your house.
Oh.
Yeah, and you know, we'd have to.
I didn't quite catch
We,
that.
the selectmen, would have to invent a new. We'd have to invent a new fare. Now,
Yeah.
of course, that would be complicated, but it was just an idea.
Yeah,
And-
well, see, the way it was conceived, at least I thought about it, you come into town, drop your car, they pick it up.
Oh, that's the
stow it.
valet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some of the taxi drivers were unhappy with us, sponsoring the valet parking, which theoretically takes business away from them. So I thought, okay, if people are paying, X number of dollars plus a tip for valet, if the taxi drivers could create a even better product for a little bit more money, that they might discover that people would rather take a cab than drive into town.
Yeah.
Which would
Of
benefit
course,
us all.
we just signed a 3-year contract, so that eliminates that possibility right now.
So, and then the other thought, I mean, every time I drive into town and drive by that great big vacant lot on Candle Street, I can't help but think, wow, that would make a terrific parking lot. Now, I know it's not going to be a parking lot forever. I know it's part of the Wilkes Square development, but as it would be a great test tube to experiment with what a few extra parking places would mean to Nantucket. If we discovered that those number of places made a huge difference, then we could go find them. We could find them either maybe by expanding the existing town lot. Maybe down the road the Washington Street building is going to go away, and then we'd have even more places. We could experiment with having some of the some of the places set aside, maybe for certain hours and have it be paid, and there's all kinds of things we can do. But I think we just sort of have to start experimenting.
Isn't that sort of a dirt area there, so that if it's raining or storming or
it's pretty grassy.
It is. Okay.
So in my vision, it would be the equivalent of when you go out to the Tom Nevers Field for a special event, and some volunteers are out there directing people into the grass fields. Now, whether that's realistic, I don't know, but I figured it's worth at least having the conversation.
Is this going to cause a little bit of traffic jams downtown?
I don't think so. I've had a lot of travel experiences, and the one particular one that comes to mind is when I was in Santa Barbara. You drive in, you come off an expressway, and within 2 blocks you come to a town parking lot where it's free. You park your car, and you're 1 or 2 blocks from all the main commercial areas. And you say, well, gee, why can't we do something like this on Nantucket? There might be a little bit of congestion, but I don't think there'd be any congestion going in. Maybe coming out might be difficult, but maybe you have them exit from the backside of the lot in a different direction.
Yeah, I know in Annapolis, Maryland, they have a parking lot that's downtown, and you can't see it until you get there. And then if you're going to go out for the day or something, you leave your car there, and it seems to work very well.
I've seen lots of those as well. You could drive by 10 times and not know you're looking at a parking lot. But anyway, it's just I think it'd be fun to experiment a little bit.
There'd be a lot of people who put their car there and then take their boat out for the day and then come back in.
Right.
Because you can walk. And then I think Petro Landing is right near there also. So that if we get Petro Landing, that's that stone pier nearby, got that operational, then that would fit into that whole process.
So you've already gone to a level that is far beyond.
Well, we're trying to bring you up to speed.
Right. It may take a while. And then the other idea, this is the best one of all, I think, that at one of the hearings you had last year, Chief Pittman, I think, suggested this, and I think it came out of the Parking and Traffic Committee, that if you tweaked the enforcement of the parking downtown and moved it a little beyond 6 o'clock, because right now, cutting off the enforcement at 6 o'clock essentially means that it's cut off at 4 o'clock because it's in the 2-hour zone.
Sure.
So all the employees who work downtown in the restaurants in particular, they can come to work at 4 o'clock, which they do, park their cars and leave them for the entire night.
Right.
Now, if you increase the enforcement time to say 6:30 or 7, they wouldn't be able to do that.
So then they have to be inconvenienced somehow.
They would either have to carpool or take the bus, or park out of town, park a little further out of town.
Right.
And now I know. I mean, the restaurateurs will squawk and say, "Well, you need to provide us with more late night bus service if you're going to do that." And so, let's do that. Let's go talk to Paula and say, we're going to need more late night bus service.
And then she's going to say, how much does it cost?
Right.
Yeah, and then we get into that whole.
Well, I think my sense is that there are both public and private interests who would be willing to help us experiment while we determine the best solution. You know, Remain has obviously demonstrated an interest in this, and
Sure.
you know, I think as long as we keep it on a small scale and clearly defined tests, that they might be willing to help us.
Now, what else are you interested in?
I'm interested in the Energy Committee and the windmill. Actually, very interested. I think during the course of the campaign, I actually probably spent more time talking to members of your committee than I did practically anyone else, and I learned a tremendous amount.
That's a lightning rod right now.
Yeah, I don't think it should be. I mean, I think that particular turbine was a lightning rod, but I realize now how much work went into it, and you learned a lot along the way that we never got the benefit of. And I think going forward, we need to bring the whole community up to speed with everything you all know already. And I spent a lot of time with Barbara Gukin, who stood with me on election day.
Oh, yeah.
Even though I didn't support the wind turbine, she did, and she brought me up to date on a lot of very interesting things.
Yeah, we're going to have to do something overall with energy on the island here, and figure out how do we make ourselves self-supporting, and whether it's wind or tidal or PV solar or whatever you have. And I think that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to face as selectmen. We can't just ignore it. We have to say what makes sense for Nantucket.
Yeah, and you and I take different approaches, and I think they're both good approaches. I mean, you're going to look at more of a global, long-term plan. And at the same time, I think while we're doing that, we should also be advancing in small steps. So I'd say, have we done a energy conservation audit? Have we done everything we can to conserve energy in the town building? Do we have up-to-date boilers and light fixtures? And so while you're out solving the long-term solution, I'd like to be taking baby steps and solving little things one at a time. Do we have the right vehicles? Should we be using natural gas trucks? And should we instead of having one big turbine, should we have a small turbine combined with some solar installation? I mean, I don't know the answer to any of those questions. You probably do already, but if you do, then the whole community should know everything you and your committee learned. That's my real point.
The thing I find is it takes quite a while to come up to speed, so that when somebody presents a different alternative, you have to think through all of the unintended consequences. And that's what often is part of the learning process. It's quite involved. It's a wonderful systems approach. You can't do something here without affecting something there.
I do some consulting work, and I think sometimes it can be very beneficial, because if you don't sometimes not knowing is a good thing. Sometimes you make a fool of yourself. So I'm prepared to occasionally make a fool of myself.
Well, what kind of consulting work do you do?
I have some general business consulting. I've done a little consulting with the Cape Cod Five. Back in one of my prior lives, I had some fairly comprehensive marketing and advertising experience, and I about a year ago I signed on, and really just to sort of help them understand the Nantucket market, and so that they could get themselves established as quickly as possible, which I think they've done a terrific job of doing.
They've done a great job.
They've made, generally speaking, things move very slowly in the banking world, and if you look at, they had absolutely no presence here 18 months ago, and you look where they are now, it's really pretty remarkable. They've done everything right.
What do they bring to Nantucket the other two banks don't?
They are a real hometown bank. Their success on the Cape is remarkable. They go up against all the big guys, and they have the biggest share of the deposit market, the biggest share of the loan market, the biggest share of the mortgage market. And I think 2 weeks after they got established here, they were delivering more personalized service than either of the other so-called local banks are, because they're not local banks anymore.
But they used to be.
Right. They're going to be what Nantucket Bank was 5 years ago and Pacific Bank was 15 years ago. They already are.
Yeah.
I mean, well, now they literally are, because most of the familiar faces from those two banks have migrated over. And I used to do some consulting with Cape Air, and then that led to me being invited to join the board. So I'm not really a consultant anymore, but I try to bring the same thought process to being a board member as I did to being a consultant.
Now, Cape Air has really grown.
It has.
Tremendously.
It has.
Yeah.
It's a $90 million revenue company now, and only a relatively small percentage of that is in the Northeast now. We have an operation in Micronesia, of all places, and we have a pretty substantial operation out in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And one of the niches we've identified is there are still markets around the country that are subsidized by the government in order to provide what they call essential air service. And it used to be a business that the larger airlines wanted to get involved in, but now it's almost become the case that unless you fly 9 or 15 or 20 seat planes, nobody wants to do it. So we were able to go into St. Louis and overnight put in a pretty substantial hub that can be very, very profitable for us.
So are you using smaller planes instead?
We're all 9-seat planes except for Micronesia, where we have 52-seat planes, I think it is.
So you've got larger equipment in Micronesia?
Yes, and only Micronesia.
So those stay there all year around?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now these other planes, do they move around? They go
a little bit. There's a little bit of movement between the Northeast and then Florida, and we also have a big operation in the Caribbean. We have a hub down there, and we're very opportunistic, I would say. We go where the opportunities are.
But that's kind of hard to manage when you get little.
It's terrifically hard to manage.
Yeah.
And it's very seasonal, like everything else. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, from my standpoint, we've had some probably more difficulties on Nantucket than we have in.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it's sort of like the perfect storm of bad circumstances, but it's been difficult for me. I go to the board meetings and we talk about how wonderfully we're doing, and read letters from customers about how happy they are, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is like a different airline, because people on Nantucket are constantly taking me aside and telling me about their unfortunate experiences. But we've made a lot of progress. We have a new station manager who actually helped in my campaign. And he has just totally revitalized the Nantucket operation. So it's getting better.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's terrific.
I remember working for an airline in Tokyo, and that was during the Korean War. And the Koreans would show up at the last moment with 200 or 300 pounds of baggage because they were hoping they didn't have to go through the customs procedure.
As soon as you said that, it reminded me that driving over here, I thought to myself that someday somebody should come over here, and you should come over and sit on this couch, and they should ask you questions, because you've done a lot of interesting things, and I'm not sure everybody knows that. I know your biggest claim to fame is that you're Sally Nash's brother, and Peter's brother-in-law. But someday I'd love to come back and ask you questions so that people can hear. You're always tossing out little anecdotes like that. Now, I didn't previously know that you'd been involved in the airline industry, let alone in was it Korea or Japan that you just said?
Well, I was station manager in Japan. We were flying into Korea.
All right.
And the Koreans were trying to smuggle. Well, I shouldn't say that. Well, that's long gone.
All right. Okay.
Okay, but they're trying to get stuff through customs, so they used the airline. They showed up at the last moment and hoping that no one would inspect their bags.
Okay. My first experience in the airline industry was I did a consulting job for Continental Airlines. And I went to Micronesia, where they had. I was still in the hotel business at that time, and they had some hotels over there, and I went over to kind of evaluate what the future of the hotels would be, and it was very similar to your experience, because at that time, Air Micronesia was a puddle jumper that went island by island from Hawaii to Guam, and people would get on literally with chickens and goats and wild pigs, and they'd march up the aisle and put them into the baggage area, and then they'd get off. And anyway, it was really pretty amazing. So
yeah, we're getting the signal now that we've overstayed our welcome, but
well, I want the time back from when the camera got tipped over, so we got cheated out of a few minutes.
Well,
so.
It won't show on the final show. Well, thank you very much.
This has been great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It was always a pleasure to be here. So.